This is New York City, not abandoned, not a ruin, not the drowned graveyard every disaster movie promised you. Look closer. Those are boats where the taxis used to be. That green climbing the towers, those are farms. And the people on the walkways above the water, they didn't evacuate. They stayed. This is New York after the planet got hot. Genuinely, catastrophically hot. The kind of warming scientists spent a century warning us about. The seas came up, the heat became a weapon. Whole neighborhoods, went under. And 8 million people looked at all of it and decided to stay. The question isn't whether this could happen. Your grandchildren may watch it begin. The question is the one nobody asks. When the water wins, how do you actually live here? Let's walk through it. Degree by degree, block by block. The end of New York and the strange green thing that grows back in its place. Everything you're about to see starts with one number, 11 degrees Fahrenheit. 11 degrees Fahrenheit of warming above the world before we started burning things. To be clear, this is the far end. It's not the future we're locked into, and it's not tomorrow. It's the scenario climate scientists file under worst case. The one where we keep burning, the feedback loops kick in, and the planet's own machinery starts working against us. But worst case is not impossible. And here's the part that should stop you. You don't need the full 11 degrees to break a coastal city. You need a fraction of it. Because a warmer atmosphere does two things to a place like New York, and both of them are patient. New York sits at the exact intersection of both threats, a low-lying archipelago of islands wrapped in 520 miles of coastline, built for a climate that is about to stop existing. It is, geographically, one of the most exposed major cities on Earth. 1. The water rises. Warm water physically takes up more space, and the hotter world melts the ice sheets sitting on Greenland and Antarctica. The ocean doesn't crash in, it creeps. An inch a decade, then an inch a year, then faster. 2. The air holds more heat and more moisture. The summers stop being uncomfortable and start being lethal, because counterintuitively, in a drowning city, heat kills more people than water ever will. So the story of how it survives has to start with how it nearly doesn't. New York already got the trailer. It aired in October 2012, and its name was Sandy. When Hurricane Sandy hit, it pushed a wall of water into lower Manhattan that crested at nearly 14 feet at the Battery. The harbor didn't rise politely. It came over the seawall in minutes. It poured down subway stairs. 7 tunnels under the East River filled with salt water. The South Ferry Station, brand new, was destroyed. 800,000 people lost power. Lower Manhattan went dark, and the damage to the city ran past $19 billion. Sandy was a single storm, a bad night. The water came, and then, crucially, it left. Now hold that image. And imagine the water that came in during Sandy just doesn't go back out, ever. That's sea level rise. Not a storm, a new height of the ocean. A permanent line, painted higher up the buildings every single year. How high? New York doesn't have to guess. The city runs its own science body, the New York City Panel on Climate Change, and its projections are sober, peer-reviewed, and genuinely frightening. Their high-end estimates put sea level rise in the neighborhood of 5.5 feet by the 2100s, and in the low probability scenario, where the ice sheets go unstable, up to 9.5 feet. Go to the global models for a true worst case, and if the West Antarctic ice sheet collapses the way some scientists fear it could, you're looking at over 11 feet by 2100. And because ice, once it starts moving, doesn't stop when the century ends, projections run to 30 feet and beyond by the year 2300. 30 feet. Understand what that erases. At 30 feet, the ocean isn't lapping at lower Manhattan. It's inside it, up to the second and third stories. The streets, become the seafloor. And the city that remains isn't the city that flooded. It's whatever managed to climb above the line. So let's flood it. Carefully. Because the water doesn't take the city all at once. It takes it in an order. And that order decides who leaves and who stays. The first to go is the ground that was never really ground. A huge amount of lower Manhattan is landfill, literally centuries of rubble and rock dumped into the harbor to extend the island. Some of it is only about 5 feet above the sea. That goes first. Wall Street becomes a waterfront in the most literal sense, and then it becomes a canal. Next, the low, flat rim of the outer boroughs. The Rockaways, Coney Island. The Brooklyn and Queens waterfronts. These are the places that flooded in Sandy, and in the hot future, they don't get a reprieve between storms. The water simply moves in. Neighborhoods that housed hundreds of thousands, become title marks. And then, the wound that never fully heals. The subway. New York subway is a machine that lives below sea level, kept dry only by pumps working every hour of every day. Raise the water table permanently, and those tunnels don't flood in a storm. They flood and stay flooded. The city loses its underground and has to move for the first time in over a century entirely on the surface. Before any of this, New York fights back. Hard. There's a real, funded blueprint on the table right now, the Army Corps of Engineers' $52 billion plan. 12 enormous storm surge gates across the harbor, 41 miles of seawalls ringing the coast. And against a single storm, it works. But a barrier is built to hold back a surge, a temporary spike. It cannot hold back a permanent rise. You can gate a harbor against a bad night. You cannot gate it against a higher ocean, forever. Eventually the sea doesn't knock, it's just higher than the wall, and the city has to stop fighting the water and start living with it. Here's the twist nobody expects. In a drowned New York, the thing that kills the most people isn't the water, it's the air. To understand why, you need one concept most people have never heard of: wet bulb temperature. It's what a thermometer reads when it's wrapped in a wet cloth. In other words, the lowest temperature you can reach by sweating. Your body's only defense against heat is evaporation. Sweat leaves your skin and takes heat with it. But when the air is both hot and humid, sweat stops evaporating. It just sits on you, useless. And once that wet bulb reading climbs past about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, your body physically cannot shed heat anymore. Not in the shade, not with a fan, not if you're young and healthy and completely still. Your core temperature just climbs, and within about 6 hours, that's fatal. This isn't heat you tough out with willpower, it's simple physics, and physics doesn't negotiate. And the newest research is worse than that. Studies now find the deadly threshold sits below 95 degrees for most real people. For the elderly, dangerous conditions can begin down in the low to mid 80s. A wet bulb reading that a generation ago seemed survivable is, we now know, already lethal. New York, in an 11-degree world, sees summers that flirt with that line. Not for months, but for days at a time. Several times a season. And on those days, the outdoors is simply off limit. Power failure during one of those heat waves isn't an inconvenience, it's a mass casualty event measured in the thousands. So the survivable New York isn't the one that beats the water. Plenty of cities will hold back water. The survivable New York is the one that solves the heat, and it solves it in the strangest, greenest way. You'd think people would just go, and millions do. We'll be honest about that later. But a hardcore of the city refuses. And it's worth asking why. Because the reasons are the reasons New York survives at all. People stay because the alternative, climate migration, is its own catastrophe. Where do 8 million people go? Every coastal city on Earth faces the same water. The inland cities that are safe become impossibly crowded, impossibly expensive. Leaving isn't a rescue. For most, it's trading one crisis for another. They stay because New York uniquely has the bones to adapt, not the flat sprawl of a Miami or a New Orleans, where the highest ground is a highway overpass. New York is vertical. It builds up. When the ground floods, a city of low houses drowns, but a city of 100-story towers just moves upstairs. The water takes the street. It doesn't take the building. And they stay because of two things buried in the city's geology and its plumbing that almost no one thinks about, until the day they're the only things that matter. A mountain of ancient rock, and a river that flows downhill from 100 miles away. We'll get to both. But first, the farm. Look again at that green climbing the buildings. It isn't decoration. It isn't nature reclaiming the city. People put it there, deliberately, because in the hot New York, a bare wall is a wasted wall, and a farm is survival. Start with the obvious problem. When the surrounding farmland floods and the highways that trucked food into the city break down, 8 million people still have to eat every single day. The answer is to stop importing food from far away and start growing it here, inside, above, and on the sides of the buildings themselves. This technology already exists, and it's not modest. Vertical farms, crops grown in stacked indoor trays under tuned light, with no soil at all. They already hit yields more than 100 times greater per acre than an open field. Rooftop hydroponic farms produce up to 10 times the food per square meter of a normal garden. Today, farms like these already grow greens on New York rooftops. In the hot future, they don't cover a few roofs, they cover the city. And the green does something else, something that solves the heat. A wall of living plants shades the building and cools the air around it through the same evaporation that cools your skin. A tower wrapped in vegetation can run several degrees cooler than the bare glass tower next to it. The greenery isn't just food, it's air conditioning you can eat. So the iconic New York skyline doesn't disappear. It transforms. The same towers, wearing a second skin of green, part farm, part forest, part cooling system, the most photographed silhouette in the world, still standing, but alive. Now the secret weapon. The single most important reason New York can survive when other coastal cities can't, and it has nothing to do with the coast at all, it's the drinking water. And it's the most beautiful piece of engineering you've never thought about. Most big cities pump their water, machines powered by an electrical grid pushing water uphill into homes. Cut the power, and in a killer heat wave, the power will cut and the taps run dry within days. In a hot, flooded city, a failure like that is a death sentence faster than the heat itself. New York doesn't pump. New York's water falls. The city drinks from reservoirs in the Catskill and Delaware watersheds, as far as 125 miles north. That water travels to the city entirely by gravity, sliding downhill through aqueducts and tunnels, powered by nothing but the roughly 1,000-foot drop in elevation between the mountains and the taps. Over 1 billion gallons a day, and not a single pump required. When the grid dies, the water keeps coming. The power can fail, the storms can rage, the subway can flood to the ceiling, and clean, fresh, drinkable water still pours out of the mountains, downhill, into 8 million homes. New York, almost by accident, built the perfect water supply for the end of the world a century before it needed it. That's the difference between a city that adapts and a city that's abandoned. Food, they can grow on the walls. Heat, they can beat with green. But water is the thing that empties a city fastest, and New York's water can't be switched off. If the water takes downtown, where does the city's heart move to? The answer is written in the bedrock, and it rewrites the entire map of who lives where. For a century, the most valuable ground in New York was low, the tip of Manhattan, the harbor's edge, where the money and the docks met. In the hot future, that logic inverts. Suddenly, the most precious real estate in the city is the ground that's highest and hardest, and New York has a surprising amount of it. Go to Washington Heights, at the northern end of Manhattan. Bennett Park sits at 265 feet above sea level, the highest natural point on the island. And it stands on a spine of Manhattan schist, the same 450 million-year-old bedrock that let the skyscrapers rise in the first place. Unique solid rock to anchor something that tall. In the flooded future, that same geology becomes a refuge. High ground, on unbreakable stone, well above the worst the ocean can do. So the city's center of gravity migrates north and up. The Heights, the high spine of the Bronx, the hills of Upper Manhattan, neighborhoods that spent a century as afterthoughts become the new downtown. The mansions of the hot New York aren't on the waterfront, they're on the hilltop, looking down at the green canals where Wall Street. The shape of the city turns inside out. The old low center becomes the new edge, a beautiful, watery, half-drowned frontier. And the old edge, the high rock in the north, becomes the beating heart. So what is it actually like to live here? Walk through an ordinary day. You wake up not in a house, but high in a tower, because the valuable floors are the middle ones now, above the waterline, below the brutal rooftop sun. Your morning light comes filtered green through a curtain of vines growing up the outside of it. On the terrace, 3 floors down, someone is already harvesting the day's greens from the vertical farm that feeds your block. You leave by boat. The street below your building is a canal now, and the water taxi is as ordinary as the subway once was. Quiet, electric, gliding between towers, on water the color of jade. Where avenues cross, there are floating markets. The rhythm of the day bends around the heat, not the clock. In the cool of the morning and the long golden evening, the walkways and the water are full. But when the wet bulb climbs at midday, the city goes quiet. Everyone moves inside, into the green-shaded, evaporatively cooled cores of the towers, and waits out the dangerous hours. It's a daily ritual, as instinctive as taking an umbrella in the rain, except the thing you're sheltering from is the air itself. It is not the New York that drowned. It's slower, greener, stranger. But it is, unmistakably, still New York. Still 8 million stubborn people, still the loudest, most alive city in the country, just floating a little higher than it used to, and wearing a coat of green. They didn't survive the hot world by beating it. They survived by agreeing with it. But let's be honest with each other for a minute. Because a story this hopeful owes you the hard part. 2. Not everyone got to stay, and not everyone got to adapt. The green towers, the hilltop mansions, the cool floors above the waterline, those went to the people who could afford them. A rising sea is the most equal disaster there is. The wealthy move up. The poor in the low-lying, cheaply built neighborhoods are the people the water reaches first, and they are the ones with nowhere higher to go. And the leaving was real. Millions did go. A slow exodus north and inland over decades that reshaped the entire country. The New York that stays is smaller than the New York that was. There are neighborhoods now that exist only as shapes under the water. A drowned baseball diamond, the top of a school. A street grid you can still see through the green shallows on a calm day. An entire lower city, preserved beneath the surface like a memory the tide never quite erases. The survivable New York is a genuine triumph of human stubbornness and clever engineering, but it is also smaller, harder, and less fair than the city it replaced. Adaptation is not the same as escape. Something was saved here, and something enormous was lost. Not a wasteland, not a utopia. A city that paid a staggering price and refused, anyway, to die. So, could this really happen? Here's the uncomfortable answer. Almost every ingredient in this story is not a prediction, it's a measurement. The sea level numbers come from the city's own scientists. Sandy already put 14 feet of water into lower Manhattan. That part is history, not forecast. The wet bulb limit is physics. The vertical farms exist. The gravity-fed water flows downhill right now, tonight. The bedrock in Washington Heights is 450 million years old. The only thing this video imagined was the arrangement, the day all of it arrives at once. And whether that day comes in 80 years or 300, whether the water rises 5 feet or 30, depends almost entirely on choices being made right now, in this decade, by us. New York might not drown. If the world moves fast enough, most of this stays a thought experiment. But if it doesn't, if the water does come, then the city won't simply die. It will change. It will climb its own towers, grow its own food, drink from its own mountains, and move to its own high ground. It will become something slower and greener and, in its own way, beautiful. And a stubborn, resourceful few million people will look out over the green canals where Wall Street used to be, and they'll stay. If you want to see which other cities make it and which ones the water simply erases, that video is next, because New York, believe it or not, is one of the lucky.